Hi everyone, my name is Lily and I'm the book reviewer behind Utopia State of Mind, and today I want to chat about what I see when I read. So I've been having more conversations within my friend group, and also I feel like more conversation I've seen within the internet in the last year-ish about aphantasia. If you have seen them, then please let me know below, because I feel like I've only really been seeing them recently within that kind of time frame. And actually, when I was talking to another IRL friend of mine about this, they also said, hey, I also saw videos about this, but only recently. So we were both kind of thinking about, okay, what could that phenomenon be about? Maybe it could kind of be that just one or two people are talking about it and then it kind of starts spreading after that, which is certainly my experience with it. So I just wanted to chat a little bit about what I see when I read, because I have talked a little bit about it on the channel before, but I don't think I've specifically named the phenomenon or named my experiences with it. So for a little bit of background, if you didn't know what aphantasia is, I will put a picture here. The basic concept is that there are people in this world who exist who cannot necessarily visualize things sort of instantaneously or upon command. Or upon ask, I guess. So basically, one of the ways that you ask people is you give them a scenario where they close their eyes and they picture an apple, and then you kind of have them describe what they picture, and that is basically the scale that you'll see in the picture next to me, which is kind of varying different degrees of how you visualize things when you think of an apple, and the different degrees, I guess, of aphantasia. And so one being kind of this idea about when you visualize an apple sort of with dimensions and colors and details and stuff, going basically from that all the way to nothing. I will say that this also doesn't talk about people who may be able to kind of evoke smells or scents when they think of an apple, sort of a sensory memory in that sense. That is obviously on the very, very opposite end of the spectrum of aphantasia. But when I saw people talking about this on the internet, it was at a time in my life where I was wondering if I had face blindness. I recognize people a lot, but I cannot picture them. So then I was thinking, do I have face blindness? I'd be trying to describe, someone that I had maybe seen, and then not been able to not been able to draw a picture in my mind or explain that to people until I necessarily saw that person again. Then I'd be like, oh, that's that person. So then I realized, okay, it's not necessarily that I have face blindness, but I can't picture people. And then I was thinking, okay, is this everybody? Is it just kind of strangers? Is it just friends? Does it happen to my close family members? And then that's kind of the starting point that I had within the last year or so, and I realized I can't picture anybody. I mean, I picked what I've kind of tried to describe it to people in terms of the aphantasia scale is that when I try to picture it, immediately blank space. But what I can do is try to create a picture in my mind. So for example, with the apple experiment or the apple question, it'll be okay, picture an apple, nothing. But then in my mind, I'll be okay, first of all, I've eaten apples, but in my mind, I'll be okay, an apple is a somewhat roundish structure. So then I'll be okay, roundish structure, but also there's no detail to it. I'm creating the sensory details in it in my mind, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm picturing it clearly, right? So I would say that even when I try to build the picture of an apple in my mind, I'm never going to get into one. I'm more or less going to start into the point where it's okay, if I close my eyes, I know sort of what an apple looks like, for example, clip art style in my mind. So I'm okay, I have seen that in my mind. So it's it's a black outline, sort of, and there's a stem, and obviously there are colors to the apple. So maybe it's red. I can eventually get to the point in which I'll know conceptually what it is, but I won't necessarily see it in my mind. I have to build out the details, if that makes any sense. And so I've determined basically through my conversations with a lot of people in my real life, my physical life, that there aren't a lot of people I know in real life who have it to the same degree as I do. There'll be people who are oh, I see it as number 1, or I see it as number 2, or something like that, but no one else would ever oh yeah, I almost know number 5, right? But while I've been chatting about this, it's kind of been putting into more perspective Aphantasia as a reader. And I am a reader. Uh, and so I just thought I wanted to talk a little bit about that as well. So I feel like I've mentioned in the past that action scenes are kind of lost on me in the sense that, they'll be describing, oh, and like this person stabbed this person, and then they turned around and they did like a cool flip and they landed on their feet, and then they, loosed an arrow or whatever. And so I'll read that and be like, okay, cool. But I don't visualize that in my mind. I don't visualize it like, actually happening. I don't visualize that battle. I know that I've actually asked authors this question before, and they've been like, yeah, sometimes I help. I have a person who helps me kind of block out the movements, and I've taken classes on necessarily sword using, so I can understand kind of how these movements would work. And that is fascinating to me. But when I read kind of these scenes, I don't see any of that. And so for a while, I was just thinking, I'm not a very imaginative person. And now I'm kind of realizing that all of these things that I thought about myself in terms of artistic capabilities or imagination, whatever, are because of this. And so also, I've been thinking why I cannot really fan cast. I don't have any concept of what people look like, right? So I'll read a book and they'll say, oh, this person smirked. And I'll say, okay, I understand what a smirk looks like, right? It's that weird kind of smarmy smile or whatever. It's not a true smile. Sometimes it's sarcastic. I understand that. And I've smirked as a person. I've seen people smirk, but I don't picture that. And so they'll say, okay, this character, they're like super attractive. They have, like lightly tanned skin. They have brown eyes. They have thick eyebrows. They have a prominent nose, whatever that even means, a prominent nose. They have a smirk on their face. They have a long kind of dark hair. That is like interesting, I guess, but I don't picture any of that together, right? So if you told me they have dark, they have dark, thick eyebrows. Okay, I understand what dark, thick eyebrows are. I have seen that before on a person. But that doesn't mean that I like picture it in my head. It's been incredibly difficult to explain to people what I visualize and the lack of what I visualize and like how I visualize it and how I remember it and how I picture things. So that's been interesting. The point is, I'm not a very visual reader. For this exact reason. I don't picture necessarily what people look like. I'm not walking through an imaginary cityscape or an imaginary fantastical setting. It just is kind of details that I'm looking at and realizing that are there. I also read very quickly, and some people now that I've talked to in my life have been like, maybe you read really quickly because you're not actively like taking the extra seconds to imagine it and walk through. I don't know, maybe anyone who also reads really quickly but also visualizes things can write in the comments below how they sort of make sense of both of those different things. But it's really made me kind of put together why I'll be like, oh, it has detailed world building, or it has, the characters are at the heart of the story, or, the characters propel it through, or it is fast paced. But then I'm like, okay, but like, I don't really have anything else to say about the world building in the sense that I can't see it. So I'll say it's detailed because I get a lot of details about it. But, when there are things maybe that I'm missing in translation in the sense that I'll get a lot of details, but whether or not those details create a cohesive, three-dimensional, fantastical setting, that's not necessarily something that I can really gauge as well. Just because I can gauge, there's a lot of details. They have details a lot about food or not about food, or about dress, not about dress. Those things I can. But in terms of an author giving enough details to create a fully fleshed out world in my head while reading it, I don't do that, so I don't necessarily feel like I can gauge that as well. Similarly, for character description, there'll be times where I'm reading a book and then I'll see images after that for, licensed character art of things, or even non-licensed, and I'll be like, wow, I did not expect that. So it's putting a lot of things into perspective. I'm still early on in terms of my journey understanding this about myself and also understanding it in relation to me as a reader. I will say that some people have been like, oh, have you always been like this? And I do think yes, because I've thought about how difficult it has been to kind of do art classes growing up as a kid and growing up as a teen, and having a really hard time visualizing these things without, for example, having a reference point or reference sketch or reference whatever. I thought a little bit more about how it is when I've done hand lettering, which I have done, but I've always predominantly focused on, or why I've liked hand lettering the most is that the majority of it is kind of either A, related to references in the book or references in the actual quote, for example, to something visual. And it also takes a lot into the graphic design of sort of where letters are, where it is. It feels artistic to me, but it doesn't feel artistic as much in the sense of like, I'm not creating characters' faces, I'm not creating scenes behind me in that sense too. So it's been an approachable way for me to feel artistic and feel like I'm producing art in the bookish space without also realizing that I can do neither of the two things I mentioned. So yeah, I just wanted to come on today and chat a little bit about that, see if I have any fellow, level 5, level 4.5-ish Aphantasia readers like me, and chat a little bit about it as well, since I've seen a lot of discussion online about having that, but not necessarily also about having that as a reader. And I am a reader, and this is a reader channel, a bookish channel, and so I just wanted to chat a little bit about that in case you didn't know it about me, didn't know it about yourself, and didn't know it in general. I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts about this one specifically in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video where I don't have as many life revelations, I guess. Bye!